All right. All right. Hello, everybody. How you doing today? Wayne, good to see you. There you go. I see we've got some people connecting to audio. So I want to say thank you for your time. We're just going to give another quick moment so that we can get some people in out of the waiting room. While we're waiting, either come off mute or put in the chat box. Today is lead generation blueprint. What's your biggest challenge that you have when you think about lead generation? And I want to make sure that we can answer some questions specific to the people that came to the call today. So in the chat box, what's your biggest challenge when it comes to lead generation? I'll get that pulled up here. All right. Or do you have it all mastered? Okay, I think we've got everyone in. All right. Here we go. We got one more coming in. There we go. All right.
Yeah.
Wayne, Eric, Melissa, thank you for being here. What's your biggest challenge when it comes to lead generation? Sometimes it's just doing it. Picking the one I can do consistently. I love that. I love that. And it's funny, before we get started, while we're waiting for people, I remember a good friend of mine many years ago, she had taken, I forget if it was Bold or I think she might have been with her coach, and someone was she came to the call and said she was stressed because she knew she needed to be calling FSBOs and she hated calling for sale by owners. And her coach said, well, why would you do something you hate doing? Like, go figure out what you're good at and go do that. And I know that she said that that was very liberating. So awesome. Okay, I think we have enough people in here. So let me move this off my screen here. And I'm going to share my screen over here so that you guys can see that. Can you guys see my screen now? Give me a thumbs up if you can. Okay, cool. Awesome. For whatever reason, you guys disappeared from my screen. So there we go. All right. So lead generation blueprint, this is what we're going to be talking about today. Miss Haley, I'm sorry, Miss Kennedy is going to be monitoring the chat. I don't know why I always call them the opposite name. So every time it's like having kids, I guess. She's going to be monitoring the chat. If you have a question, if you have something that you want to bring up, don't hesitate to stop me. This is your class and your time. And if we get a little off topic, I just want to have permission to reel us back in so that we can make sure that we stay on topic throughout the rest of the day. So when we talk about lead generation, we talk about a blueprint. I want you to think about it like this. When you build a house, you have a blueprint that says this is what the house is going to look like. Now, it does show where the walls are. It shows where the foundation is. It doesn't go into detail about what color the countertops are or the paint on the walls or the style of carpet. But it's a blueprint. It's an outline or a framework that says this is how you build this thing that you're going to be building. And then we're going to add color and touch and other things to that. So for the purposes of today's conversation, I just want you to understand that this is kind of that big picture blueprint, although we're gonna go down into a few specifics that you can use. So let me go to my next screen. Yeah, can you guys see that? There we go. I got you back now. I know most of you, but for anyone that I do not, my name is Brian Wentz. I've been a real estate agent for almost 3 decades now, so I've been a long time in the industry. I jokingly say I started when I was 6. I did not, unfortunately. I've seen a lot. I've had a lot of success. I've held a lot of roles in the company. I've had a team doing over 200 units a year. I've been a solo agent, so I know what it's like to grind it out in the solo space. I stepped into leadership about 2012, and I spent about 7 to 8 years growing 3 offices in a different location in Des Moines, Iowa, and throughout the Iowa network. And I looked up one day and realized it was cold where I lived half the year. And we're going to talk about this today, but a life by design is a life where you truly are doing the things, you're living where you want to be living, you're surrounded by the people that you want to be surrounded with, and you get to You get to pick your life. And so to the extent that I looked up one day and went, wow, I live where it's cold half the year, and realized that I had the opportunity to relocate to the beach and do some of the things that I wanted to do. That's what brought me here. And I've been here since 2019. So I currently serve as the operating principal for Get to Be a Select and Gold, and I hold a couple of other hats. I tell you that because I was an agent at one point that I was doing between 50 and 60 units every single year, year in and year out. But the problem with that was that I was doing, there we go. I was doing 50 to 60 units a year, but I kept having the same year over and over and over. That interview is actually on my foot. There you go. I kept having the same year over and over and over, and it was a challenge because I knew that there was something more that I wanted to get to, and I was told at the time that you can't grow that fast. I was told that you're gonna have to give up to go up, and I was told that it's going to be a lot harder. Like it's going to take way longer than it should, or than I felt like it should. And those answers didn't settle well with me. And ironically, that's when I got recruited to Keller Williams. And as a 50 unit a year agent, I went to Mega Camp which is typically in Austin, Texas, typically in July or August or September timeframe. And I hear these agents from stage talking about doing 200, 300, 400 units a year, and they're holding up the MREA, the red book, and they're talking about, I'm just following the model. And I literally turned and said to the person next to me, I didn't even know there was a model. Like, can you tell me this? What is this? And that was part of my genesis of coming to Keller Williams. And so this lead generation blueprint is a little bit of a best practice that I've learned having lived in the agent shoes and having grown a business that was generating 135 closed units through a database. I learned it as a team leader in terms of helping agents to grow their business systematically and be able to have more money in less time. And then, of course, as an OP, I get to coach and work with our top people, work with our staff to help them do this. So that's where these concepts have come from. So I want to start with this fundamental concept that the purpose of business is to fund your truly perfect life. And what that means is you get to choose the life that you have through your business and through the decisions that you make in your business. And that's kind of both empowering, and it's also one of those things that once you know, you can't unknow. So it can be a little empowering and can be a little burdensome. And what I mean by that is that for you as an agent to be able to decide, my business is funding everything that it needs to fund in my life when blank is true, when a dollar figure is going into my bank account each month and I'm living this particular lifestyle. And that could be the number of hours you work, that could be the number of days you take off in a year, could be the number of trips you have, could be living on a sailboat. And my wife, who's a MAPS coach, she's got a client that lives on a sailboat half the year and sells hundreds of homes a year. But this is the life by design. And the purpose of business is to fund your truly perfect life. So the first obligation is we have to get really clear about what is that truly perfect life. What do we want to be doing 5 years from today on a Tuesday afternoon at 2 p.m? Okay, that clarity is power. Now, in doing this, and Kennedy, I'm just going to ask you, you can see my screen? Good. For whatever reason, it's off my screen at the moment. So clarity is power. So what we have to do when we talk about funding your truly perfect life is this. We have to get clear on what we call your base survival camp. Your base survival camp is what's the minimum amount of money it takes for you just to pay your bills and pay your taxes every year without any frills, without any thrills, without anything that's the extras. Now, by the way, do we want to have the extras? Yep, we want you to have the extras. But this is just the basic. So it starts with, what is that survival guide number? Then if we take that number and we add to it, how much debt do we need to pay down? And of course, debt is at all-time highs in this country right now. So unfortunately, a lot of people have that. So how much debt do we need to pay down, and how much over how many years? Is it 10 grand a year? Is it $50,000 a year? We're just going to add it up. And let's say your survival base camp is 100K and you need to pay 20,000 of debt pay down. So we're at 120,000 that we need to earn. Now, the first one I call the not doing list. And this is, I can see Wayne on my screen. So I think about Wayne, if there are things in your life that you wish you were able to do that you'd say, man, if I had the time and the money, I would spend my time on that. Let's identify what are the not doing things on your list, and then let's assign a dollar value to that. In other words, it could be that I'm not going to the gym, and that is, to hire a trainer and have a gym membership, that's $100 a month. I'm not doing these other trips that I would like to have with my family because we only get each year once in our lifetime and we don't get it over. And unfortunately, time is limited. So what are the things you're not doing, and put a numerical dollar figure to that. Then when it comes to our savings and our retirements, how much per year do we need to be putting in such that when we reach the appropriate age and we decide to change what we're doing. I don't love the word retire, because retire, if you look it up in the dictionary, it actually means to take out of service. And I don't know about you, but you can shake your heads or give me a thumbs up. I don't think I ever want to be taken out of service. But how much does it take to retire? And when I think about that, I also think about the fact that in real estate, we're in an industry where if you work at Gap jeans, like when you're in college or high school, one of the benefits of working there was you got to buy cheap jeans. We work in real estate, so we get to buy cheap real estate. And so having an investment strategy as a part of your business plan that says, hey, I want to acquire one rental every so often, 1 year, every 2 years, whatever that is, let's bake that into your plan so that we're on track for our life by design. You may have college tuition or others that you take care of. We need to add in, how much does that cost every year? We might have a toy wish list. We might want to have a boat or an RV or something unique that would enhance our opportunities, our fun, and our enjoyment of life. Last is tithing and charitable giving. How much do we want to give in the community? How much do we want to give to our church? Where do we want to make an impact, and what's the dollar value of that? And that dollar value can be time or money, but in this case, we're going to call it money. We're going to add all that up, and we're going to add about 30 to 35% tax to that number. And we now have our life by design number. And one of the things that's interesting about this, I teach a class called Quantum Leap, which is all about having an intentional life and really building an investment strategy. One of the things that we've learned is that if you don't know how you're going to spend the dollars, you'll never earn it. But psychologically, once you decide, here's how I'm going to deploy this income that I make each year, once you know how much it is, now your brain starts looking for ways to make it true. So it's just kind of a funny little way that our brains work. So now let's move on. Here's where I want you to understand on this. And I've got you, actually, I'm going to tell you what, I'm going to stop the share, and I'm going to go over to my Elmo here. I'm going to go over here so you guys can see this. Okay. So the results that we get in our life are a correlation of the amount of time that we've spent on task. And so if you think about it this way, small thoughts, small habits, small actions, and small thinking. But here's the thing that's interesting about this is, does it take any more effort or energy to think big versus thinking small? No, it doesn't. Your ability to think big is just the ability to envision what's possible. And so your business is really built first in your mind, and then secondly, actually in the activities that you do every day. And it's in your thoughts, your habits, your actions, and your relationships. So what I wanted first to do is encourage you to think big. And we all have a lot of money programming from growing up. Sometimes money is the root of all evil. Sometimes money is bad. And the reality is that money is good for the good that it can do. And money will expose who you are. So if you're a great person, more money will make you a greater person. And so I want to encourage you when you think about your lead generation blueprint, start with your mindset and think big. Think big thoughts, think big habits, think big actions, and think big relationships. Which is to say, and this is not a political conversation, but if you were hanging out with Bill Gates or Elon Musk every day, would life look a little bit differently than if you're hanging out with Bob or Sally? It might. And so recognizing that it costs nothing more to think big is an important part of that, which brings us to our next thought on this. And that's this, that we want to plan from A to Z. And what I mean by that is that in our businesses, we have this tendency sometimes to think about our business in terms of, like I think year one, and especially new agents, sometimes we think like this. In year one, we think, well, I think I could start here, January 1st. I think by the end of year one, I think I could be here. And, I think I could probably be here by year two. And then you get into the year and then get to December 31st. You go, okay, where do I want to be next year? Well, I want to be a little better than I was this year. So I'm going to be here. And we tend to just kind of duplicate this over time. This is what I learned sitting in the mega camp that I was in Austin that day. And it was this. When you think big and you plan from A to Z, in other words, you say, my business is funding my truly perfect life when blank is possible, and we've allocated every dollar. Well, now we just plan to Z. Now, the reality is you don't reach Z your first year, and it takes a little bit of time to get there. But what happens is over time, that big thinking, those big actions, those big habits will create this gap right here between what was possible and what was possible and what you would have been at if you didn't think possibilities. And over time, we see that agents' businesses just exponentially explode. And really what happens is you start to have what we call the hockey stick. I don't have my right pen here, but where your business just starts to take off like that. And all of a sudden, boom, things are happening. So if we go back to planning from A to Z, we want to begin with the end in mind. And we want to get really clear on that. For me in my business, I know this is weird because I had an economic model that was predicated on being able to fund something that was really important to me in terms of a legacy that I want to live. But for me, my economic model was 1,224 units. And I knew the moment that our team did 1,224 units, we were there. For you, that might be 20 units, it might be 50 units. We're going to talk about how to reverse engineer that in this session. But beginning with the end in mind, first get clear on the economics of the life that you want. Then we're going to look at how do we drive that through real estate. So the first part is our economic model. This is part of the 4 fundamental models. Your economic model is simply the numbers of your business. And I'm going to be honest with you, I'm dyslexic. I have dyscalculia also. So numbers are probably one of the most challenging things for me in the world. And yet I love putting money in my bank account. So I've gotten good at being able to analyze the numbers. And this is what an economic model looks like. Oh, hey, it disappeared there. So let me see if I can pull that up for you. Hold on one second. An economic model is simply a breakdown of, here we go, there we go. From the current slide. There we go. Let me share this back with you. Okay. Your economic model is simply a breakdown of all the numbers that we start with at the top. That's a pre-tax life by design number. So that's going to be, this is the number that we've created either from our life by design exercise or by backing up from a 5-year to a 3-year to a 1-year goal to be able to say, for instance, if you're a new agent and your goal is $500,000 a year, it's possible to earn that in the first year. It's just going to be harder than if we achieve that over 3 or 5 years. We might start off with 100,000. We might move to 200,000. We might move to 350, 475, and by year 5, we're earning $500,000 a year net income. So we're going to back it up to say, what is it in the next 12 months that we want to earn? And your leadership team can help you with this. We also have a class scheduled on, I believe it is Thursday no, it's actually next Monday. So Heather is going to be teaching on the economic model and actually helping you to build yours in that session. But it starts with how much do you want to earn? It adds in your cost of sale and your operating expenses. It says how much total after all of our expenses are paid do we need to earn from our business. And then it drives it down, as you'll see, into a net result. And the important part of that about this is that this takes that big elephant goal and breaks it down into a bite-sized chunk. And in this case, this is just an example. 150,000 of net income after everything else is paid for comes down to doing 2.36 appointments per week. And I don't know about you, but it's hard to meet with half of a client. So we're just going to round that number up to 3. So we have 3 appointments a week. And statistically, based on the way the economic model works, if we do that, we're going to be on track monthly, weekly, daily to be able to hit our big goal. And so this is the power of the economic model. Now, by show of hands or by a hand or 5, how many of you guys have a economic model already built? Okay, so it looks like that might be an opportunity for us in here. So if you don't have one, get with Kennedy, get with Heather, or take a look at the training calendar and we'll get you on the schedule. Okay, so let's keep going. Once you figure out how many appointments, so we know that we need 3 appointments a week. The question is, where are those going to come from? I love that. Melissa says you. Melissa, is that you have one or you need one? Okay, I'll watch the chat. So now we know how much we need to earn. We know how many appointments a week. Oh, good, you have one. I love that. You now have the number of appointments you need a week, which allows you to do 2 things. 1, figure out where do the leads need to come from in order to fund that. And then 2, the second part is what does my schedule need to look like? Because we want to make sure if we need 3 appointments a week, that we actually go to our calendar and we put on pre-time blocked 3 appointments. And then our game all week is to be able to fill those. Now, the easiest way to fill those is through this concept. Gary Keller has a quote that really hit me when I first came into the organization. And he says, real estate is a local service business driven by the individual agent and their relationship in the local market. And I think it's important to know that it's not about Keller Williams, it's not about me, it's not about any of that. It's actually about you and your unique relationships. And so over time, as you build your Met database, the people that know you, like you, and trust you, and by the way, those people can come from past work experiences, past organizations, churches, friends of your kids, all of that. Those can all be Met contacts. The way that I always define the litmus for Met contact is someone who, if you saw them in the freezer aisle of the grocery store, they'd be like, "Hey, Wayne, good to see you. It's been a while," and or they know you enough to come over and say, "Hi, I know we know each other." That's a Met contact. They know you, they like you, they trust you, and so your number one source of business is your database. I'm going to talk about how we look at this top down in terms of your business, again from the blueprint strategy. So the path is the math. The MREA was predicated on a set of best practices that said, this is how top agents that were doing 3, 4, 5, 600 units a year, this is how they were building their team. This is how they interacted. This is where their leads came from. And what Gary discovered was over time, the average MREA agent was generating 320 closed units out of a database of about 1,920 people. And so that is to say that at the end of the day, your business is your database. And so when we talk about lead generation, there's a lot of different lead gen levers that you can pull. There's for sale by others, there's expireds, there's door knocking, there's circle prospecting, there's charitable organizations you can be involved with. It's really anywhere that you can interact with another human being and have a meaningful conversation that connects you. And then you have an opportunity to, at some point, talk real estate and let them know what you do. But the 4 laws of lead generation, at the end of the day, are all about build a database, feed it daily. So build a database. So name, address, city, state, and zip, phone one, phone two, one, email two of each person you have a relationship with. Number two, it's feed it daily. Number three is interact with it systematically. And number four, yes, you actually have to service the leads that come from that. And so when we talk about feeding it daily, most people realize real quick that means adding to it daily. However, it's adding names to it, but it's also adding details. So when you see on Facebook or the Insta Twitter that your client took a great trip to, Rome or wherever it is they went, going in and making a note of that so that you can then be able to reference back, hey, I know you took a great trip. Where'd you go? What'd you see? What would you like best about it? And that's where you start to build that trust or that connection with them. And the speed of trust is what this relationship building is all about. So build a database, feed it daily, interact with it systematically, and service all the leads that come from it. Those are the 4 laws. And of course, that's simply done. It's just not easy. It's time on task over time. So let's look at how we calculate this, because we actually have the ability to, with great certainty, plan the exact number of people we need to have in our database such that it's always producing enough leads to drive our economic model, because we needed 3 appointments a week. So here's an example. Now, this is a reality of the current world that we live in. When Gary did his research in 2002, 2003 for the MREA, what we found is that the average agent was able to do more units with what at the time was 33 touches a year than what we're able to do today. And the reason for that is the world's gotten more complicated. We have more things that ding and ping and, take our time. Emails, text messages. Some of these were things that just weren't quite there at the time. So 2 things to remember. One is if we're following the MREA 1 model, we may have to compensate for how we communicate with consumers today. Or 2, we may just have to increase the frequency of those communications, and both work, and both just have different strategies. So to give you an example of what this looks like, if the path is the math, if we know that at the time the MREA was written, for every 12 names in that database, 2 people a year would raise their hand. One would want to buy, sell, or invest with you. The other one would refer someone that would buy, sell, or invest to you. Today, on average, and I think this is both a product of what I discussed with changes happening, but I think it's also a byproduct of the fact that agents maybe got away from building their relationships the way that traditionally worked the best. But today, on average, we see about a 6% rate of return. That means for every 100 names, you'd close about 6 units a year, statistically speaking. Now, if you're a brand new agent, it takes a little bit of time, typically 12 to 24 months to hit that 6% rate of return. So in that case, if we were going to do 25 units per year at 6%, that means we need to go find 416 met contacts. I'd just round that up to 450, but we need to have between 400 and 450 people who know us, like us, trust us. And by trust us, what I mean is that they've got some level of connection to you where they just have the basic line in the sand of trust is there. And over time, we're going to develop and build that trust with some of what we're going to talk about. Now, the reality is the better you are at building those relationships, the greater those numbers come in. And this is where your skill as an agent really starts to come into play. So if we were to look at this based on traditional numbers, an exceptionally well-run database, we're going to talk about what that looks like here in a minute, that would produce about a 16.6% rate of return, which means for every 100 names, you'd close 17 units. Now, I don't know about you, I kind of like the shortcut sometimes. And if I'm looking at this slide and I'm looking at this slide, I'm going, well, let's see what we have to do to get that from a 6. First, let's get it to a 6%. Then how do we get that from 6 up to 16? And I will share with you, part of the secret of that is great customer service, great attention to detail. And I don't mean that you have to be the detailed person. But we're going to talk about your organizational chart in a little bit. You have to have the people around you that can handle the details so you have a great experience. And I'll tell you, I went to a car dealership here recently, had a really great experience, took another car back to that dealership, or it was just a shop. And I tell you, I had a really kind of crummy experience. And despite the fact that I had a great experience the first time, that crummy experience the second time caused me to go somewhere else. And I was able to get the same job done faster, cheaper, and I just felt better about it. And so, that lack of attention to detail caused that business to lose a customer. That's where customer service matters. And so if we had that same 416 name strategy, that same 416 met contacts could produce almost 70 closed units a year versus 416. Okay. I'm like in the 69 a year. So the path is the math. We have figured out how much does it take for us to live our life by design. We've done our economic model. We figured out how many appointments a week that creates. We've then said, based on that, how big do we need to build our database? And one of the things I'll share with you is that many times agents, oops, let me click off that, stop the share for a second. Many times agents, particularly in the Florida market, they have the sense that, well, I don't have a database. I just moved here from somewhere else. The reality is you can actually use the database where you came from as a base camp or a starting point. Then we just have to build your lead gen strategy here such that you can start to feed those new contacts in. When I started in real estate in the 90s, I had moved to a new city and I knew exactly one person. It was my friend that lived in that city that said, you should really come live here. It's a cool town. And I realized real quickly, I just needed to meet some people. I started doing open houses. That was my strategy. And I would hold 4, 5, 6 open houses a week. I oftentimes would sit in an open house from like 10 in the morning, especially if it was vacant, from like 10 in the morning till 6 at night. And for me, I realized I could either go sit in the office where the only buyers or sellers that are coming in are somebody else's clients, or I can go do the same work that I was doing from an open house with a whole bunch of signs out and have the opportunity to get people to come through and meet them and get their story, ask the open questions that we ask. I built the vast majority of my roughly 714 name database through open houses. And I'll tell you, first of all, the power of that is I got to meet a lot of cool people. I got to help a lot of really great people. And over my career, we had one client that 5 generations of the family ended up doing business with us, all the way from the kids that weren't even born that grew up, all the way to the great grandmother that tried to sell the house with a cat. And like she wanted the cat to go with the house, if you get my drift. So that's where creating those new relationships can really plant seeds that can last for decades in this industry. So let me go back to the slideshow. Okay, the path is the math. Okay. So now that we know how many met database we need to have, we need to go through, and this is just a best practice. This is a Keller Williams concept. But we want to get really clear on what's the big goal. And of course, earlier it was 150,000 and 3 appointments a week. That I believe it was actually 230. I think it was 230,000 gross commission that netted 150 and generated, I believe it was 25 closed units a year. We want to take that and say that's our big goal. Now, what are the 2, 3, 4 priorities that need to happen? And then under each priority, what's the strategy that we implement? And this is called a GPS or a 135, and it is a roadmap. And so when you open up Google Maps or Waze and you put in an address, it shows you, particularly Waze, shows you a pathway. It says, would you like to go this way? Or would you like to go this other way that takes a little longer? Or do you really want to go the scenic route that takes the longest? And you get to pick. Your GPS for your business is just like the GPS on your phone. It's telling you what are the waypoints? Where do you have to go? What has to be true before you get to like turn the corner and go in a different direction? And so your goal on your GPS should really always be predicated on the number of listings needed to obtain your closed units and your GCI. And so in our team, our GPS that we had was we needed to take 119 units. There we go. We needed to take 119 units to close 240 total transactions for 1.44 million GCI and 872,000 in profit. We got really clear how many listings we needed to take because listings are the high leverage gift of the real estate gods. That's Gary's quote from the MREA. So we're going to build out our GPS. And this is a great thing to do this time of year because you're in the holiday season. Things are still picking up for the year, but you've still got time to plan. And so this is an example of a GPS. This is actually a GPS for getting 220 units a year. But it can be as simple as, where do we want to go? What are the 3 or 4 priority areas? And in this case, it is tools, systems, and people. Now, by the way, I would get really clear on what are we trying to achieve. So how would we know when that priority is hit? This is just kind of a kindergarten version of this, or a Crayola version of this. So here's the systems that we need to put into place. Here's the tools that we need to be utilizing. And then lastly, here's the people. Here are the people that we will need to hire over time to get us to where we need to be, okay? There's no right or wrong with the GPS, but the thing that is most important is that your first priority is the one that more than anything else matters the most. And your first strategy under that priority is of all the strategies, that's the one that matters most. And so I would say something like systematic lead generation, 2 hours a day, and making up any lost time on the weekends if needed. That would be a very great way to track your lead gen activities. Okay, so that's a GPS. Now we know what our pathway is to get there, and buried in that GPS is this concept. And this is we used to call this a 36 touch, and I call it a 72 touch now. Your touch campaign is your method of communicating. And I said it's build a database, feed it daily, interact with it systematically. Well, this is that step. This is the interacting with it systematically part. A 72 touch or a 36 touch is simply over communication and over saturation over time. Now, that's really important to understand when I say that, that's predicated on it being value. If you have somebody that delivers you value, we have a mortgage loan originator in the Inglewood office that I get his mortgage updates every week. And because I'm a real estate geek, I actually like that, and I actually read those. So he becomes top of mind awareness because he's providing me something that I value. So part of it is figuring out what do your clients value. And most of the time, if they're a homeowner, they like to know the value of their home. So that's a really good way to do equity checkups regularly. But we're going to talk about this a little bit deeper of how do you plan out that 36 or that 72 touch that adds value and creates top of mind or TOMA awareness with your clients. So this is my trick. I like the easy button for things. I use this website a lot. Kennedy's probably laughing because she knows this is where I started a whole bunch of stuff. Go to a website called calendarlabs.com. It's just the easiest place I've found to download yearly calendars and put on it whatever holidays, whatever else you need to put on it. I print this out on paper, and this is what this looks like. I start with circling day 1. If I'm doing a 36 touch, and this is kind of intuitive when you think about it, a 36 touch is 1 touch every 10 days over the course of the year. We do a 72 touch, which is twice that. It's 1 touch every 5 days throughout the year. You get to decide. But what I do, if it's a 36 touch, I circle day 1, day 10, day 20, day 30, day 40, all the way through the year. And then I just start to decide, what is it that I would do? What would I send? Would it be something I would see them? Is it an event? what would cause me to create an interaction with that set of consumers that are in my Met database. And by the way, I'm probably going to include unmet and vendors and other people, because you never know when you turn an unmet into a met just through consistent communication over time. So what would cause us to have an interaction that would be of value? Well, January the 1st, every year, that would be my market update. So I would send out to my customers, hey guys, hope you had a great holiday season. The new market just started. I'm sure you're probably curious what's happening in the real estate industry. Here's some trends to know about last year. Prices in our area went up about this much. Inventory went up about this much. And here's some brief commentary on what that means for you. And I would always ask them if they wanted to know the sales price of the last 3 homes that sold in their neighborhood, just give me a call. By the way, the people that would call are people that are thinking about selling or doing something that year. So we got creative with these. Sometimes the March mailing around St. Patrick's Day was a little postcard that said, wishing you the luck of the Irish on this St. Patty's Day, hoping we're so lucky you'll send a buyer or seller our way. And we would put a $1 scratch lottery ticket in there. Fun is not my strong suit at times, and yet somehow intuitively I found ways to make lead generation fun with our clients that that we were very blunt what I was looking for. I'm looking for you to do business with me or for you to refer someone to me, but we made it fun. We would send little popcorn packs in April that said the spring market's starting to pop. If you, I forget what it said. I forget that one. The other one said, if you know someone thinking of buying, selling, or investing in real estate, give us a call. We'll stick with them to the very end. And then that 36 touch was a stick of bubble gum. Just don't send chocolate in the summertime. I found out the post office does not appreciate that. So this is the way that you can plan out your 36 or your 72 touch for the year. And then it's simply a product of going back to your calendar and saying, okay, well, if I need that to go in the mail January the 1st, when do I need to start on it? Now, we also have this concept of we're going to send, call, see. And so sending is direct mail, email, items of value, neighborhood valuations, evidence of success. In bold, many years ago, they used to teach the 2 mailings a month that you should send out is, do you know a buyer for these homes? And have a list of homes that you're looking for a buyer for, which you're lead generating for listings. Then do you know a home for these buyers? I'm sorry, you're lead generating for buyers. Then do you know a home for these buyers? And list, Sally and Mark. And, we're looking in this location for this style. If you know someone that is thinking about making a move, let us know. You're lead generating for listings on one side and buyers on the other side. That's twice a month. That could be 2 of your monthly touches. And by the way, you can use listings in the market center to do that, or buyers in the market center. And you can leverage other people's activity to bring business into your business, which I think is a cool way to do it. So DTD2 is called doing the database 2. We covered the send. This is the call part of your lead generation strategy. If we break the alphabet into 2 letters per week, what we find is that you would call, and that's who we call that week. So in other words, in week 1, you'd call anyone with a last name of Alpha or W, whiskey, or A or W. I'm trying to say my name, Wentz. The next week you'd go B&E, the next week you go D&O. If you just simply put in your lead gen strategy or in your blueprint that you're going to do the database to, you will have automatically called each one of your clients 4 times a year. And research shows that is one of the ways that you increase that from a 5, 6, 7% rate of return up to that 16+% rate of return. And I think I said this earlier, but we were getting over a 19% rate of return just by having a lot of touches and a lot of interactions with our clients and giving great customer service. So we're going to DTD2, we're going to do the database 2, and then you can go back to your calendar labs and you can just start to put in week 1, this is who I call. Week 2, this is who I call, and all the way down and through. Now, what I want you guys to hear on this is none of this is rocket science. None of this is all pretty fundamental stuff. But, just like golf is usually won in the short game, real estate the same way. One of the best ways that you can build out your lead gen blueprint is to plan client events. Client events can be things like a party in the park that you host for one client, or that you host for your clients while another agent cooks burgers and brats, and then the next weekend you do it for them, so they do it for their clients. It can be movie nights. It can be comedy clubs. It can be whatever you want to do where you get to interact with your people briefly, give them an experience, and then the event does the heavy lifting for you. You can also engage in things like Red Day. There's Make a Difference Day, which is in October. There's a lot of ways you can do this. But if you hold 4 client events a year, then in January you're calling and saying, "Hey, we have an event coming up in March. I'm going to call you next month with the specific date and location. I just wanted you to save the date." In February, you call and say, "Hey, here's where it is. Here's when it is. Love to see you there. I stuck a mailer in the mail or I sent you an Evite, or I sent you a text so that you could remember it." And then in March, you either see them at the events or you call them and say, "Hey, I'm so sorry we didn't see you there. We're planning an event in July, and I'll call next month with more details on the location. Hope to see you in July." Now, I don't know about you, but when someone invites me to something like 3 or 4 or 5 times, there's a certain point at which I'm like, "Okay, honey, we probably need to go." Like, I start to feel guilt. Your clients feel the same way, and then they get there, they interact with you, they hear about what you're doing, and now again, you've got top of mind awareness, TOMA. Okay, so those are 4 reasons to call. As you're looking at the growth of your business, the other thing to be thinking about is that there's going to be a time where you can't do it all. And we go from I do it to we do it to eventually you could earn the right to go to they do it, which takes a lot of work, and yet it's very possible in our industry. So we want to get clear on the who, because I said relationships were a part of being able to hit big goals versus small goals. So we have to get clear on who you need and in what roles to achieve the goal. And of course, our fourth fundamental model is the organizational chart. The only one we're not talking about right now today is the budget model. And so we know from research that on average, this is on average, a solo agent can do about 24 to 30 units a year. Now, I believe that a solo agent should hire a transaction coordinator, someone like Gulf Coast Closings, right from day one. And the reason I say this is since the book was written, transaction coordination has kind of settled in as a consumer's expense. And so that's something that's a service, just like an appraisal or a home inspection or a termite inspection. It's something that can be passed along to the consumer that can give you leverage and helping to increase that customer service. So it starts off with you and probably a transaction coordinator that is a transaction that's a cost of sale. You only pay them when you close a transaction. Now, the 24 to 30 units comes in this way. If you're a single parent with 3 kids under the age of 10 and they're all in different activities, the reality is you may have less time and you may need to bring leverage into your life faster if you have a big goal than if you're a single individual with an unlimited amount of time to work and no responsibility in the world. So some of this is just, it depends on your individual miles may vary based on your needs. So that's 24 to 30 units a year. Then typically for most agents, the best practices is now we hire an executive assistant who oversees, ironically, your 36 touch campaign or your 72 touch campaign as a base of their job description. Like at the heart of what they do is they keep you on task. They take your 80% off. They do all the other stuff. They oversee the details of the transaction getting done, but they're actually there really focused on building that database and building that from a 6% rate of return up to that 16% rate of return or even further. When you think about it, in an admin, you hire them, you might pay them $50,000 a year, but if they generate $150,000 or $200,000 worth of revenue, they actually paid for themselves. And that's the key to the organizational chart, is playing the game in such a way that they pay for themselves. So we now know who we need to have in those relationships. And I encourage you, if your goal is to do more than 30 units, or even if your goal is to do, somewhere between that 20 and 40 or 50 units, it's never a bad time to start looking at the career visioning process, which is our proprietary monologue, getting into relationship, and just learning some of those skills in advance. Because when you're ready to hire, if you wait till you're actually ready to hire, it feels a little like Swahili. It's like learning a new language. It feels awkward. But if you spend some time in it, you have some comfort in it, it'll be a lot easier. Okay. So now we're going to go back and measure what matters. This is the book, The Four Disciplines of Execution, is an exceptionally good book around this topic. And if you want to lose weight, we know that it's calories in, calories out. It's how much do we eat, how much do we exercise. Those are the inputs. And the output is when we stand on that scale, what does the scale show us? Well, that's leading activities and lagging indicators. Okay, so leading and lagging measures. So we want to track the numbers that matter. We want to track every week. And by the way, Kennedy will smile because we do this daily in a market center. But we want to track how many listing appointments did we need to go on versus how many did we go on. We want to track the number of listings taken versus the number of listings we should have taken. We want to do the same with buyers' appointments. We want to do the same with buyers taken, because this gives us insights into our conversion rates. And if we know that the average agent takes 80% of the listings and we're going on appointments and we're only taking 40%, then we may have a skill gap that we need to work on. Conversely, if we're working with buyers and we close 90% of the buyers, we might go, hey, I've got something in my DNA of my customer service profile that is really good. How do we do more of that, and how do we get in front of more buyers? So all of that's called the four conversations. And a really big part of that is maintaining what we call a pipeline report. And a pipeline report, and I see, Wayne, you're in my line of sight. You have what I think looks like a pipeline report of like, here's all my listings coming up behind you. That great job. That pipeline report is, I used to keep it in a journal. So as an agent, I kept it in a journal. Today, we use a Google Doc so that other people can edit that. But that pipeline says, who are my high priority customers? And if you have somebody that's looking to do business this month, great, that's who I need to be working on this month. If maybe they're about a month out, what are the activities I need to do to get them ready for a month out? If they're 2 months out, 3 months out, all the way down to 6 months out. And so that pipeline just becomes a clarity tool. And I don't know if you're like me, but I have a lot of stuff coming at me. I have a lot of things happening, phone calls, texts, emails. And as an agent, there were times I just would forget someone. Like, I can't remember sometimes what I had for breakfast. I would forget a customer, and I would always feel bad when I looked up and realized they had bought or sold without me. And so that pipeline was really the key to keeping me focused on the people that mattered the most, that were the top of that pipeline. Now, I want to share one other formula with you. We talked about MET databases to close units, the 6% or 16.6% rate of return. There's another formula that in the MAPS coaching community has really emerged as a very common formula, and it's this. For every 10 leads that you receive, so these are sign calls, internet inquiries, texts, phone calls, someone from something, anywhere that someone raised their hand and said, hey, I'm curious about this property. Over time, an effective lead tracking and lead follow-up system will result in, for every 10 leads, you will close 1 unit. Which is to say, you can also go back and say, well, how many leads do I then need to create? This is the harder way. The database is the easier way. But the harder way is to say, how many leads do I need? So if I needed 40 closed units, then I need to do something that produces 400 leads over the course of the year from all my lead sources, all my lead gen levers. And we know that on average, agents do 80% of their business from 3 lead gen levers, and on average have a total of 5 that they work. The biggest one of that is always database. So do I need to do database plus door knocking or circle prospecting? Do I need to do that plus calling expireds? Do I need to, am I a golfer and I want to go hang out in the golf community and talk real estate with people? What's that lead gen lever that I'm pulling? But to do 40 closed units, it means we would need 8 leads per week, which is just a little over 1 lead per day. And so I like those round math because I can go, did I produce a lead today or not? In a market center, it's 2 appointments a day for us because we're in the same business. We just hire real estate agents like lead generate for buyers and sellers, where you lead generate for buyers and sellers. And so it's 1 lead per day. So you can kind of start to do that math and say, how many leads do I need to produce? And what do I have to do to go get those leads? So just two different ways to two different sides of the same coin. I do think over time you have to make sure your mission matters. And I'm not going to go real deep on this, but people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And over time, being able to have something greater that you're working towards. I'm very involved in KW Next Gen and teaching our young adults, 18 to 30 years old, how to have an intentional life and have their best life. Get clear on what your mission is about in your business, and then there's an opportunity for you to link that. And when the consumer starts to link what it is that you do for either the community or your charity work back to your business, now you become that guy or that lady that does that thing, and that can be very impactful. That's very sticky. The next thing we want to do is we want to make sure we time block our schedule. We do have a time blocking class coming up next month. And I know we're getting close to the end of the time, so we'll start to land this plane, but time block your schedule. If it's not on your schedule, it does not exist. And let me go here because I see my slide. I'm not sure why my slides aren't showing, but let me go down and pull a time block schedule up so you can see what that looks like. Time blocking is simply the product of putting the things on your calendar that matter the most. Okay. And let's see if I can do that. There you go. There it goes, full size. So, thank you, Kennedy. I appreciate that. I just realized we had a little more time than I thought. So time blocking is the idea of purposefully, it's a big word, purposefully pre-allocating your time in a way that the things that matter the most live in your calendar. And in bold, we have a statement that says, if it's not on your calendar, it doesn't exist. And I think that is very true. Now, the reality is this is a super heavily time block schedule. This would be like utopia, perfection. And by the way, perfection doesn't exist. But I just want you to get a sense of what it looks like. This is actually 50 hours per week of actual work. This would be 50 closed units per year on an average agent's skill set. We have 10 appointments a week. We have, actually, I think this was 100 units a year now that I think about that. We have 10 appointments per week. We have a total of 15 hours of lead gen. We've decided we're going to start our day at 6. We're going to get up and dress. We're going to prep and plan. We're going to get into lead generation. This picture is from one of my other offices that their team meetings are at 1 o'clock instead of 11 o'clock. But then we go in and decide, these are our first appointment time, these are our second appointment times. And with something like this, even as a solo agent, you can take your Sundays off, you can take your Saturdays off, you can negotiate offers as needed on Sunday, and you don't have to be a 24/7 pop-up agent. For much of my sales career, I had a home on a lake, and I would travel 3.5 hours away on a Thursday evening, and I would Saturday, Sunday, Monday be at my lake house, and I'd come back and I'd work very hard Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And that allowed me to have counterbalance where I could have time off, I could recharge, I could do the things I wanted. And I just set my schedule and my activities and my who's up around me to make sure that that could happen. Again, this is where it's this goes back to that life by design. We are human beings, not human doings. So we want to make sure that we're not doing and doing and doing, because sometimes when we wake up, we have a handful of do-do. Okay, so let's talk about if you get off goal. And the reality is that, this, we do have times we get behind. Sometimes that's because of our own activities or schedule or focus or motivation. Other times, I'm going to tell you, it can be outside forces. And I think that it's really important to really have that kind of check up from the neck up to recognize am I off because I failed to do something, Or is there another factor that's affecting that that maybe means I have to double down on my activities? And we're about 3 years and 6 months into the lowest sales pace in US history when adjusted for population growth. So what I want you to hear in that is you're in a time where real estate is almost as hard to sell as it's ever been. When you take population growth out of it, the last time it was this difficult was 1995. And I was about to get into the business at that point. And when I got in, I was like, this is hard. Like, wow. Well, the reality is when you start in a down market, you learn the skills to weather a down market and then flourish in an up market. So you're actually starting in a really great time. Heather actually started in, I believe it was August of 2008. Do you remember the crash in September, October? We were calling each other to see if our phones still worked because no one was calling. And of course, the economy was on the brink of collapse due to what had happened at the time. So first, when we get off track, we have to first, awareness is the start of all change. We have to realize we're off track. Now we need to go into a model that I call a reset. Okay. And it's reflect, evaluate, simplify, establish, and time block. And so let's look at what these look like. Okay. Oops. Hey, where did my slides go? Hold on, guys. Sorry about that. There we go. All right, so here we go. From the current slide. Sorry about that. Not sure what's going on. So the mid-year reset. There we go. There we go. Sorry, guys. Time block. Okay, mid-year reset. So when we talk about doing a reset, we want to make sure that we don't lower our goal because we set a goal that was based on that life by design, and we want to make sure that we're pushing and creating what I call structural tension to be able to get us there. So the first thing is don't lower your goal. Let's go back and let's examine. Let's look under the hood and deep dive what's going on. The R is what I just referenced. It's reflect. It's go back and look at what's real about my situation. Where are we? What is it that you set out to accomplish initially? How are we doing? What's the gap between what we needed to do and where we are? And we just have to get real clear with ourselves on that. And that's just, sometimes people think accountability is someone like whipping you to get you to do something. The reality is accountability is just like when you turn on Google Maps and there's a little blue dot, or Apple Maps, there's a little blue dot. The blue dot says you are here. It's just what's real about your situation. And that's really what accountability is. So when we talk about someone helping you, hold you accountable, it's really helping you able to achieve your goals. So what you set out to accomplish, how are you doing? How do you feel about it? Sometimes we have to check our emotions because sometimes if you're not familiar, there's the energy of different emotions. And when we get into lack or scarcity, we make decisions very differently than if we're living in abundance. So how do we feel? And let's go back to why was your goal important? It is possible that something changed and maybe the goal that you thought you were pursuing is different. I had a very good friend and a fantastic agent who we held each other accountable for years together in a three-person accountability group. And when we came to Keller Williams, he started growing his business by leaps and bounds, and he set this massive goal, and he was doing fantastic on it. And he called me one day, and a grown man, almost in tears, and he just said, "I don't know why I'm doing this." And I said, "Well, what do you mean? Like, are you at Target? Like, what do you mean? What are you doing?" And he goes, "Well, I just looked at my bank account and my retirement account," and he goes, "I don't really have to work anymore. I'd rather go fish." And I said, "Steve, like, tell me about that." And we ended up purchasing his business through Golden Handoff. And he bought a cabin up in Minnesota and spent his days fishing. So going back and asking why was your goal important sometimes can be insightful because you may find that there's something else calling at you or something has changed. So that's the R. The E is evaluate. And I think this goes back to what I was saying is if you're behind, you're probably not alone. And the number of people who, if you think about running a marathon, the number of people who finish in the top 10 are a very small part of the people that all of the people that are running. And so you may be just running at a little bit of a different pace, and that's okay. Like we just evaluate what's causing us to be behind. We're going to identify the gap. Kennedy and I, this morning on one of our calls, we're on our leadership call, we're talking about the fact that the activity leads to the results. And so when you identify the gap, how many appointments was I supposed to go on? How many did I? What's the gap? What would I have to do to make up that gap quickly? And I remember Heather having a great conversation about this, that when she was behind, she had a goal of 101 units a year. She was behind, she called a builder and she ended up listing multiple builders' properties. And that's one call that led to, 10 or 15 listings. That's when you start to become strategic in how do you fill that gap. Then we just have to get aggressive with activities. And we have to realize that if it's twice as hard to sell real estate, we might have to put in twice the number of smart hours. And I reference smart hours versus dumb hours in that it's not just the time put in, it's very effective use of the time. So get aggressive with your activities. Simplify. And this is something that I do about once a year. We have this thing that happens. It's kind of called schedule creep. And you may agree to do something and then something else comes up and you're like, yep, I can do that too. And then all of a sudden, your entire schedule is full of things that are other people's priorities that are now detracting from you actually hitting your goal. And so manicuring your schedule goes back and really looking at everything on your calendar and reassessing why did I agree to it? Is that agreement serving me? And is it helping me or is it hurting me as it relates to my goal? Gary in the One Thing talks about the fact that every yes has to be defended by 100 no's. And I almost say that every yes has to be defended by 1,000 no's. In other words, we have to say no to a lot of things so we can say yes to our goals. And the only thing when we talk about managing we talk about time management. The reality is we can't manage time. 24 hours are going to click by every day, whether we like it or not. And we don't have that time stretcher to make it 28 hours. So what we have to think about is managing ourself in time. And so how do we manage ourselves effectively such that those 6 or 8 hours that we need to spend in our business are really the most productive? Okay. So what can you stop doing to free up time and resources that can be dedicated back into your business? And what are the things that if you stop doing it, no one would ever notice? And again, we're in the same business you were in. Our leadership call today, we had something that we're like, I'm not even sure anyone's like looking at that. Like maybe that's something that we can manicure out of the schedule and be able to devote those resources to other places. And I use the Market Center as an example because the Market Center is sort of my team of people that have the goal of serving you and growing the Market Center for your sake and for others' agents' sake. So we're really in the same business. So asking what can you stop doing to free up time, and what are the things that if you stop doing, no one would even notice? Okay. Next, it's establish. Get really clear on what's the one activity you can commit to that will ensure your goal is hit. And the reality is sometimes that's very simple. And yet, other times it may be a keystone habit that starts a chain reaction. And there's a really great book by Charles Duhigg. It's called The Power of Habit. And in there, he talks about the concept of the keystone habit. And for instance, I know that for me, my keystone habit is my bedtime. If I get to bed at the right time, I'm able to get up early in the morning. I'm able to get my journaling done. I'm able to get my reading done. I'm able to be showered by the time things need to start having demands of my time. I can have spent time with my family. I can have done the things. And so for me, I know that keystone habit is bedtime, and I track, did I go to bed on time? Some days I do great. Other days there's a show I want to watch or something that I want to unwind with. And, there you go. But what's the one activity you can commit to that will ensure your goal is hit? What is standing in the way of you doing the right things? And sometimes it's just actually going in and doing it. And I know that when you talk about lead generation, that first phone call or that first communication, the handset, I know we don't use handsets anymore, but that phone feels like it weighs 1,000 pounds. And the reality is you make that first call or you have that first interaction and you're like, that was fun. And now the next one's easier and they just get easier from there. So what's the one activity you can commit to that will ensure your goal is hit? It's established. And then the T is time block. Go back and reassess your time blocks. Are there things as you get into 25 that you realize they are not on my calendar that I need to be adding to my calendar? Or are there things on my calendar that they're there, but I'm not doing them? And that can be a problem also. So success in real estate is about following your calendar and nothing else. And so if your calendar has the right steps on it, you're going to succeed if you do that. And when it comes to time blocking, I always say that I always ask people, if I were to look at your calendar, would I know what your goal is? And if you approach your time blocking from that perspective, you'll always make sure that if a third party can look at your calendar and know what your goal is, then following that schedule is probably going to ensure you success. And so that's that reset. My time blocking was in there in the wrong spot. That's why. So you're off goal, go back, reflect, evaluate, simplify, establish, and time block. This is something that you can actually go put into your schedule once a month for about an hour to go back as you work on your business, not in your business. When you're on your business, you're doing things that move the business forward. In it is the practice of selling and buying real estate. Put this on your calendar and go back and use that as a tool to be able to look at where you are. Okay. So with that said, that is your blueprint for success. I'm going to stop my screen share here now. Let's see. Let me click off this. Stop the share. That's your blueprint. And as I led off the call, I was saying, just like building a house, that blueprint is the structure. It's the foundation. It's the building blocks. You're able to go in and add color and texture and all the other things to it from there. But that's your lead generation blueprint in a nutshell. So just to kind of go back and refresh, it's the purpose of business is to fund a truly perfect life. Figure out what do you need to be earning to be living the life you really desire, the life by design. Then we get clear on that, what it takes to achieve that through the economic model. So we know how many appointments we need to go on, and the path is the math. We look at how many names do we need to have in a MET database, or what are our lead gen activities to build that database? And while we're building it, then how do we funnel or fill those, in the case of the exercise we did here, 3 appointments per week. So what does my GPS need to look like? We looked at what our 36 touch needed to look like, or a 72 touch, so 1 touch every 5 days or 10 days throughout the course of the year. We looked at do the database too. We talked about the 4 touch, the event 4 touch model. We looked at leads and how to calculate that 1 out of 10 leads should be in closed business, and that's just a great thumbnail. And then we looked at the reset model of how do you go back and re-examine where you are. With that said, I really encourage you, if there's any of these steps that you don't have clarity on, if there's any of the steps that you look at and go, man, I haven't done that yet, it's okay. It's kind of like the reflect. We're just going to go back and re-examine that. When you have these tools, you have them in front of you on a regular basis. And I still keep right here my team's GPS right here so that I can see that when I need it. When you keep those things in front of you, you revisit them regularly. It's shocking. The brain will start to find ways to achieve your goal. And that's your reticular activating system. That's the thing that lives in the back of your head. It's the same thing that when you buy a blue car, you drive it off the lot and you see blue cars everywhere. Your brain will start to look for ways to do it. And so feed it what it needs, which is what we just talked about in terms of the blueprint, and your success as an agent can be wild, and you can take it anywhere you want to go. But with that said, I'm going to pause the recording here, and I would love to just hear any ahas, questions? We've got about 10 more minutes that we can go if you have any questions, comments. Love to have someone come off mute or put in the chat box a couple of ahas. What'd you hear that was significant or meaningful, or that you didn't know that maybe we connected a dot for? Okay. Melissa says my 36 touches, one touch every 10 days. I love that. Love that. That 36 touch feels wonky until you realize that number, and then you're like, okay, it's 10 days. I need to make a touch. Awesome. Anyone else? Ooh, Kennedy said how important the economic model was. That's awesome. That's great. Now you guys are all appearing back on my screen. I think it was my screen share. Haley, I see you're there. Good. Thanks. Appreciate it. Wayne, for you, anything you heard that you can implement or that made a new connection? All right. Okay, guys. If there is nothing else, I will close you out. And if you need any help, let us know. We do have, oh, he said the reset of my goals is how to complete them. Great job. Thanks, Wayne. I like that. So a couple of other things. We do have an economic model class on Monday that Heather's teaching, and I believe it is next Thursday. Kennedy can confirm. I have a time blocking class that we're going to go a little bit deeper. And in that class, we're going to talk about what it means to have $100 an hour activities, $1,000 an hour activities. That's a big sentence. And then $10,000 an hour activities. But we're also going to talk about what it means to have a negative $100 activity, because you can actually do things that are losing you money. So we encourage you to take a look at the calendar, time block those if it is important. And let's grab an amazing 2025. I will say we've had a hard couple of years, and kudos to you for hanging in there. And we're going to see growth. We've got an economic call coming up, I believe, in 2 weeks, where I'll update the state of the economy and the state of our market. But we're started to head in the right direction. So things have kind of gone down, and now they're going to go back up. So the good news is 2025 is going to be a better year than 2024 was, and that's good news for all of us. So I appreciate your time. If you need anything, reach out to me, and go focus on your lead gen blueprint for the day.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys. Have a great day, everyone.